Hello, relations. This will be my most vulnerable podcast to date. This is the episode where I share my story. And it's so important to share our story. Because for most people, much of our story is not something that we've written as a deliberate, conscious creator in our now moment, but it's inherited by our past and the people, the society, the culture, our environment, and what people told us about ourselves, largely from early childhood experiences. Those things need not define us. We are always writing our story as a conscious creator in this moment. And though your life may have data points, your relationship to what those data points are, the story that you write, the meaning and the belief systems, the orientation is always shifting. So your past is malleable in this way. As you change in the present, so does your past and your future. The present is your moment of power. Paul Chek talks about the importance of myth making. You are writing your own personal myth. I often coach individuals to write their story as well and to look back at the past and the major points in their life and to reinterpret them in this psychoanalytic way. We can alter our relationship to the past, which alters many things, including our literal physiology and the way that our body creates itself. Because when you change the past, you're changing the present, and the very genetic mechanisms in your body respond to this. It is profound to share your story and continuing to write your story with every breath and every step you take. I feel it's vulnerable in that sharing a story is very personal. Sharing your own story is very, it's the highest level of very personal because it's yours. And you have to own the highs and the lows. And I shared a bit of my story at a recent Expansive Man men's retreat, and this is what inspired me. So my encouragement to do this for myself is to track where I've been, which has got me to now, and where I'm going. I feel this is helpful to help other people. It's also vulnerable because I have a certain level of discernment as to what I share with individuals because I hold a position of a healer and an internal arts practitioner and someone who's in the wild world of spirituality. And if an individual is coming to see a healer of any kind, they want to have a certain trust in them. Of course. And hearing information that may be triggering, that could shine more of a negative light or shadow, talking about the shadow, may bias their filter or projection. For many other individuals, and this is why I'm making this, it's actually a statement of authenticity and connection. When someone can share what they've been through, their negativity, I have my addictions and my past with jealousy and manipulation. When I can be open and honest about that, people can trust me more. But inversely, people can hear the negativity and it can create a bias and a projection. And this can have a negative skew. So for me, it's not about just sharing everything all the time. There's discernment as to what to share and when. So I'm trusting this basic intuitive impulse within me to share the story and to allow what comes out to be the words that are meant to be expressed. And however they're received, this will be good. So I'm happy to share my story because I love who I am. And as best as I can, I love the whole story of my life. And by going back into it, I can learn to love all the little itty bits. My final caveat before beginning my share is that the opinions and my relationship to the data points, my belief systems are always changing. So I may post this soon, and then within a year or so, my belief systems, relationship, and orientations may shift. So I will have a completely different axis of interpreting the information that I've shared here. So this just represents a snapshot moment in time of my past and how I'm relating to it currently. Without further ado, in 1990, on October 13th at 10:23 a.m., I was born Zachary Pete Coop with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. The first words my mother said was, "Why is he blue?" I'm an alien, yo. Came out of the womb with a little bit of trauma, yeah. For me, in my relationship and understanding of the cord wrapped around my neck, this is a passing on of my past life, a past life where I had hung myself. And this is a major through line, the throat region having a sense of constriction that has been a teaching that'll ripple through multiple different parts of my life. To be continued. When I was a child, some things I'd like to mention here is that I did like isolation. I was sociable. I wasn't a complete isolated and desiring to always be alone, but I definitely, in what I was taught and what I was told from my parents, loved to be alone in my crib. I had chronic ear infections for much of my early years, which left me with partial deafening. I don't remember the exact percents, something around 70% in one, 40 in the ear, 40% in the other ear. And then when I went into school, I had speech impediment. I had delays in my speech, hard to pronounce certain like R's and S's and these kind of things. So what I understand about this is I had some early childhood trauma coming into this life, and I was very sensitive to my environment, even though I had a kind of deafening in the ears from the five sense auditory sensation and stimulation coming in. When I was young, meaning when I was a baby and a child, I had these intense audio frequencies coming in that would bring about auditory and even visual hallucinations. My understanding of this now is some of this information was not from the five sense reality in that level of frequency, but it was a higher level of clairaudience and clairvoyance coming through. And this is common in a lot of individuals who have a impediment in any one of their five senses to take on the energy of, light's a certain frequency, auditory is a certain vibratory range that we hear. So there's a capacity those individuals have to tune into a subtle realm, which is not contingent on the organ, the ear or the nose to take in the frequency, but of the energy of the soul, or a more subtle vibrational frequency, which is an aspect of our being. This also comes in with a lot of individuals who have trauma. My case, the early childhood cord wrapped around the neck. Some individuals with really traumatic or abusive upbringings will have more of a spiritual attunement because the physical five sense reality and the pain and discomfort is so much that it's hard for the soul to be incarnate and present. So what they do is the soul has a kind of soul loss or disembodiment where it's, yes, still tethered. The fundamental faculties are there and the system is running, but a lot of the soul is still in spirit. So that individual may have a spiritual relationship and spiritual gifts, but they may have trouble embodying, may have trouble choosing life. To be continued. I struggled with relationships because I was very shy from my early years. I know that I really loved animals. I could connect with animals. I could connect with nature. I could connect with art. And my very first platform for expressing art was drawing. I remember I was a little bit like a Buddhist in that I like to draw pictures and then destroy them. Something happened when I started to draw and other people started to see those drawings, that it shifted the authentic expression of me expressing art, and then it became a thing. My grandfather saw that I was an artist, and he put this kind of subconscious pressure on me to be like Walt Disney, and that he would pay for me to go to art school. And then I lost my relationship with art and largely stopped drawing from my soul. And then I drew to please people. I would draw a card from my grandfather to make him happy. And fast forward to recent years, when I started to draw again out of the pure expression of my soul expressing, I reconnected with that original essence, and many of the clairvoyant faculties that I had suppressed when I was younger, when I stopped drawing, came online again. I'll mention here that the sound of being partially deaf did go away. I received these tubes in my ears, and the reason why I was getting the deafening in the ears was because of chronic infections, and those eventually cleared up. And then there's a funny moment when I was taken to an audiologist, or whatever the term would be for an individual assessing ears, and the doctor, whatever you might call them, was like, he no longer has a hearing problem. Now he just has a listening problem. And this was my defiancy coming online at that age. No longer could I claim to not hear them. It was more that I didn't want to listen to them. Why defiancy? I mean, a certain percentage of the population I see are just, they're like Heyokas in the Lakota tradition. A little bit more like a backwards person. Not claiming to be a full Heyoka, which has a certain classification and standard, which I'm not claiming to be, but I have a certain level of being a contrarian, doing things backwards, being someone who challenges the status quo. And I played this role being in a Christian home and going to a Christian school from my early years. I shouldn't say never, but I didn't resonate with the teachings, especially the dogmatic way in which they were offered in church and in school, where my questioning of why, I never felt like I could get a satisfactory answer. And I remember one particular point, being in bed at a very young age and feeling like this deep level of fear and darkness because of the possibility of going to hell. And I went deep into that fear, and then it distinguished, because I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I go to hell if I die because of sin and not believing in Jesus? And there's people in the world who are in Africa who never hear about Jesus. How is that fair? It just didn't add up. I'm like, this is wild. So I shouldn't say I never. There wasn't a moment, I can't think of a memory at least. I won't say never, but I never, maybe I never did. That's what's coming through. I don't remember having a time when I connected with those teachings in a developed or deep way when I was young. So I played a bit of a contrarian role, was a rebel when I was younger, a troublemaker, one of those students who was doing a lot of comedy in class. Got suspended quite a few times. Very early on, I believe in like grade 3, took magnets and put them all over the computers because if you put a magnet on an old school monitor, it changes all the colors and it looks really cool. And later in the years, I was in grade 11, saw some kids throwing themselves into the wall because this was the days of Jackass and that was the thing to do. And me and my friends like, why would you like run into the wall? That's silly. They were recording all of this. It's like, why don't we throw you into the wall? That's much better. So we grabbed them by the arms and we would toss them into the walls. And we did this kid after kid. And finally, the last kid, we started to get closer and closer. So the last one we threw into the wall, he had no room to turn his head. So he just went smack into the wall and broke his nose and some teeth. And I think he got some mild concussion. But he explicitly gave us consent on the video. So there was no charges or assault charges that the dad wanted to offer. But that didn't go through. For those of you who don't know, in the human design system, I'm a 6'2" reflector, a role model hermit. My sun sign is Libra in the Western astrology, and my moon is in Leo and Scorpio ascendant. I don't know my exact gene keys off by heart, but some of the primary themes are trailblazer. So it's a divergent pathway, and there's a lot of recommendation about my intuition and being in my body and not my mind. There's a lot of themes around my numerology and other systems about harmony and balance being a primary theme of my life, which has been very resonant. The reflector profile is it's a human from the human design system, and it says a lot about my auric field and how it's more like a Teflon field where I don't have any open energy centers, which means I sample a lot of energies from my environment without having a dominant energy. My energy shifts with the cycles of the moon in 28-day cycles. And unlike some more empathetic beings who are very open, but they take on the emotions of others, I'm very open, and I in some sense sample the energy and emotions of others, but being more Teflon, kind of amplifying and offering that back for their own reflection rather than taking them on. So like fast forward to me now, I spend a fair amount of time in meditation and in isolation living on my own. So I cultivate an energy field around me through my practices and through my mantra, because the energy field, the aura, is it's like the radiance of all of our thoughts and feelings, our body, its health, the vitality of the organs, the genetics. All of these things are internally represented at various levels of the three bodies: physical, emotional, and mental. And these are vibrations. Every thought holds a vibration, and every belief holds a vibration. So this is all in the musings of the auric field, yeah? And our auric fields have different ways of relating with one another. Just like we have body types, we have auric field types, yeah? So when I'm saying I have a cultivated auric field, when I'm spending time alone, my thoughts and feelings are being broadcasted as an energy field around me. So when I do meditation and qigong practice and mantra, I'm emitting, say I'm singing to Ganesh for 60 minutes, a field of energy around me. It becomes like an aura around me. And it feels very good to cultivate a really beautiful, good field with belief systems that are in alignment for me with my dream affirmative life or universal principles, with love and harmony. Then when I go out into the world and I meet an individual, I interact with their auric field, right? So if they have a lot of negativity in their field, or doubt or shame, at a conscious and subconscious level, that's affecting my field. Fields are such that if I say something repeated, there'll be like a stickiness in the field, right? So like, you've probably had it that you've listened to a song a bunch of time and the song's like an earworm in your head. It's like that thought form is magnetized to you in some way. It's like sticky in your field. And sometimes we have thought forms, which is like an energy of the thought as a frequency waveform tied in with emotions. And we might have these from songs that we hear. We might have them from comments that people have made when we were young. You're too tall, you're too skinny, these kind of things. And those are all in the field, yeah? So the more sensitive an individual becomes to the energy fields around them, there's a certain degree of energetic maintenance that happens. So as I mentioned, there's many individuals who are quite empathetically sensitive, meaning they are very sensitive to their and others' emotions. And there's obviously a lot of finer ways we could classify that, but as a generalization, but they take on the emotions of others. So those emotions penetrate their emotional body deeper, and they may linger longer. I don't know the exact ways of this because that's not my type, and less research than theirs in the specifications of each energetic type in that way. But there would be more of a lingering in that. And some are like completely resistant. You've probably met these people. They're, in their own energy and the emotions of others, they're quite disconnected from. This isn't to be positive and negative, better or worse. These are genetic variations that at a holistic level benefit the all. So anyways, my auric field is much like Teflon. I'm very open. So I have a capacity to feel a great range of people's energies, physical, emotional, mental, but also I'm very reflective, so I amplify those and don't take it on as much. So I like the cultivation of my field and a lot of alone time. This has been something that has been since I was very young, as I mentioned, and this is something that I didn't obviously know about. I shouldn't say obviously, but I didn't know about when I was a kid, but this was the patterning that I had, is I like to have a certain level of isolation and distance. And now that I'm much more aware of this, there's a beautiful cadence that I have of how much time do I need to be alone for the optimization of my energy so that I can be most productive in the energy healing that I do, and the optimal balance between socialization and interacting with others and isolation, being on my own. And you can get into all different types of systems here about how your unique genetic blueprinting works and how it would be most productive for you to work in the world, etc. So just thought I would mention that there for those who know, and giving a little bit of an introduction into some of the more subtle energetics to get to know me on that level. Let's fast forward. Shall we go? Yeah, let's go beyond school. I want to get into the later years of life here. I had a fairly tumultuous teenage years with mental health. I, from a very young age, didn't have the tools to self-resource and to regulate my nervous system effectively like I do now through internal arts practices and breathing. I didn't have good teachings when I was young about emotional expression, so there was a lot of suppression, and this caused a lot of mental health imbalance. I went to various doctors that, in a 5-minute session immediately told me that I had depression and told me a story about this being a chemical imbalance and that couldn't be cured and I would need to be put on medication. Offering these ideas to a 14-year-old is very dangerous, maybe even as early as 11. I can't quite remember how early this was. And then continual diagnosis, which was more like an exploration for them, being told and medicated for bipolar for a time, even for schizophrenia for a time. My parents did their best to help and support me, but they didn't understand what was wrong. by the time I was 18, I wasn't dealing very well with my system, and got into a car accident, and the stress and overwhelm of life became too much. I woke up one day, and a voice in my head, a negative thought form entity, told me to kill myself. This repeated negativity had been with me for quite some time. It would taunt me to throw myself in front of vehicles, and kind of like chant negativity about self-depreciation and hate in my own mind, and in that weak state of overwhelm, with a court case, and I was in all kinds of trouble, hanging around with gangs and drug dealing, and just in a really dark place. I very unconscious, yeah, that I listened to that voice. It said, go in the shed and a rope and go to the forest and hang yourself, and grabbed a rope and went into the forest, and this wasn't that premeditated, though I had some earlier experiences with suicidal ideation and how I might do it. Tried to get a gun multiple times, couldn't get the hookup, and yeah, it had been in the field. So because it wasn't premeditated, I had no idea how to actually tie a noose effectively. So I climbed up a tree and I tied a knot as best as I could. And I remember I was wearing a red snowboard jacket. And then I just tied a knot, just like a circular knot, and I let myself go into the noose for a moment just to test it out. And the pressure built up so much in my eyes, and I started to see stars and went a little bit black, and I did a little pull up and got myself out and knew that it worked, and didn't say a final goodbye or anything. There wasn't like a big conscious transition. I was in such an unconscious state, and I let myself go into that noose, and I entered a dark black space, and I had some experience beyond death, one of several in this life. This wouldn't be the last time that I consciously and subconsciously took my own life, but I didn't, obviously. I didn't die. I woke up on the ground. You can write your own story about what happened. I don't know. I would assume I unconsciously got to a point of blackout, and a survival reflex took over, and I pulled myself out and dropped down onto the ground. Maybe an angel picked me up. Maybe a little bit of both, But I had a moment of consciousness there and a recognition that I needed help. So I came home and I was like, Mom, Dad, I just tried to kill myself. I just hung myself. Take me to the hospital. I need help. So my parents took me to the hospital, and they put me into the psych ward, where I stayed for several weeks. Don't remember how long. And that was a big part of surrendering and recognizing that I need help, that I couldn't just hold all this alone, that I was out-resourced, and many good things came from that. They put me on like 5 different medications or something ridiculous, which that was a negativity, but they taught me cognitive behavioral therapy. I started drawing again. That was actually one of the first times I started drawing again for myself outside of I stopped pretty well after that till recently. I draw pictures all day. Art therapy, it was helping me to reconnect with my soul, and many people came and visited me. I had trouble connecting with people on an emotional level for most of my life, so the one thing that held me on was Chewbacca, my golden retriever dog. And my mom would come visit me. My mom and my dad would come visit me every day. And I remember having a real hard conversation with them, because I have really great parents. I have really, really, really great parents. And I told them that I didn't kill myself for so many years because they loved me and I didn't want to do that to them. Their prayers and their love helped me, and I got to a point where I was so numb and the pain was so much that I just couldn't take it. And that was a real turning point for my relationship and emotional expression with them. So we tore down that wall together, and my dad found this doctor named Dr. Swingle in Vancouver who did this kind of biofeedback therapy. This was quite some time ago when biofeedback wasn't super big. And it was basically like meditation training. Like we see these modern things about you meditate and it helps the mind to calibrate towards different frequencies to help out with imbalances. But at the time it was really cool. It was I went into this doctor and he didn't ask anything about my depression. He just took these scans and then it's like, oh, you likely have depression and you likely have this. And it was bang on. And then we do this like meditative training where they hook me up to all these things and I look at a screen, and when my brain is in these more coherent frequencies, the little thing on the screen moves forward. It was like racing. And when I'm out of frequency, it would stop. So I'm not necessarily doing anything. The spontaneous oscillations of my mind, when they're more harmonious, would move it. And there would be some kind of reward relationship that I would do and develop with what was happening in the race. I remember there were about hour sessions and I would come out of them like super exhausted. It was hard work for my mind. But it helped, and it introduced me to meditation at quite an early age in my life, and I started to meditate in small ways about at this time. I started to focus on positive things. I really loved hiking. I really loved going to the gym. I really loved sports. And did those as much as I could, and a lot of my life did take more of an upward swing here. Still was dealing with a lot of unrecognized, denser emotions and traumas in my system. Many things were good with the working out, but I also got into body dysmorphia, and my addictive nature brought me into steroids. So, I weigh about 175, 180 as like my comfortable weight, even if I'm working out and building some muscle. In and around there is where I sit. Started doing steroids in my late teenage, early 20s. Got up to like 230 pounds, so put on a lot of muscle in a very quick time. It tore my flesh quite a bit. I got huge scars in my armpits and in my legs because a lot of it for times was water weight of just like this huge pump, and I literally just tore my flesh open. The first cycle was well and good. There's a way to work with steroids, and there's a lot of bad media on steroids, and there can be ways in which individuals use them in a good way and have limited negative results, you could say. And there's obviously steroid abuse, in which there's an overtaxing of the system and taking hormones and other things to ridiculous levels, let alone the psycho-emotional implications of these things. For my second cycle, I went into that addiction. And usually you start a cycle off nice and slow and you amp up, and then like a parabola, is that the right word? You go up like the mountainside and you go down the other side in a good way. I went up and then I didn't want to come off, so I went up again and didn't go down, and then I didn't go down and went up, and it was all over the place. And then at some point my hormones got completely out of whack, and when you take all this testosterone, you gotta take anti-estrogen, otherwise your estrogen can shoot up. And my estrogen shot up because I got out of balance, and I grew I grew tits, like lactating tits. Gynecomastia is one of the medical terms for this. And I burst out with acne. I mean, I had acne all through my teenage years, metaphorical or metaphysical manifestation of self-hate bursting out, which is part of the reason for the body dysmorphia. Yeah, but I burst out in acne all over my back and my shoulders, biceps, triceps, grew hair all over my body, like Sasquatch. I'm not a hairy person, but all of a sudden I had a chest full of hair. Wild things, yeah. Psycho-emotional implications. Like all I wanted to do was fight, fuck, and work out. Hyper masculine, hyper man brain, which is like the orientation towards stereotypical masculine things, even to the degree of the negative masculine, like the objectification, more associated with systems and objects than like empathization and socialization, which encouraged negative tendencies towards isolation that were already part of my history and imbalance. And this begins to change gene expression. And yeah, a lot of this was in a time when my masculinity was in the shadow of not healthy masculinities. So it was an amplification of those, which is a pattern in a lot of my early childhood of like taking my imbalances to such an extreme of addiction or going so deep into them that the rock bottom happens before change, which works. I would love to have saved the headache of going that deep, perhaps at times, but that's when I needed to learn those lessons. Funnily, depending on your sense of humor, I went from being a jacked up steroid person to going to university and realizing I have some intelligence. Like I didn't do well in school because I didn't apply myself. I thought I was a more of a jock. So I didn't recognize that I had any intelligence. I always thought my sister was the smart one, and well, to be honest, when I went to university, they said my English was so bad that they thought I was a foreign student at first, and I had to take pre-university English, which is funny because, as many of you know, I do a lot of writing now, so I think I made some progress, though my writing in my prose and my punctuality is still quite off. That's why I call all my writing poetry as a artistic escape for needing the perfection of punctuation and all the things that go with it. So I went to university and realized that, hey, I'm interested in things and I can do really well. And then I didn't have to, but this was about the time when the pressures were coming on to make career decisions. At the time, I was working construction and I really hated it, knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was a very toxic environment. And then I heard the Eminem song, Shake That. It goes a little something like this in the third-ish verse. I'm a menace, a dentist, an oral hygienist. Open your mouth for about 4 or 5 minutes. Take a little bit of this fluoride rinse. Swish but don't spit it. Swallow it and now finish. Yeah, me and Nate D-O-double-G. And then it goes on, you know? And I heard this and a part of me was like, I should be a dentist. I had taken a test in high school that was a placement test, and they're like, you could either be good for like dentistry, being a doctor, or a psychotherapist. So I had that in my mind, and that reignited that. But I didn't have, I just discovered that I have some level of intelligence, and the idea of becoming a dentist, when I looked at how much it would cost and how much schooling, was too daunting. I didn't believe in myself, didn't think I had the capacity or be supported financially in that way. So I was like, what if I start off as a dental hygienist? I hate what I'm doing right now. I took a 1-day job shadow and I grew up with a great dentist, and it seemed really chill. It seemed really easy to me. My mind wasn't, I want to work hard and yeah, it just seemed really easy, and they make really good money for what I was making there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to do it. Go over to Ontario to do my schooling and do really well in school, particularly for the first semester because you don't actually have clinical. It's all just like science and physiology and pathology and all these things, and was a Dean's List scholar, top of my class, and really loved the theory. The first day I got into clinic, first day I put my hands in someone's mouth, for one, I had a really hard time being social and connecting with individuals my whole life, and now I'm in a very intimate experience putting my hands in people's mouths. Extremely challenging, and there was immediate recognition that I don't like this and I never want to do this. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit. I wrote my parents a big letter. They're like, I know you supported me and helping me out financially to get me here, and I need to quit. This is not my path. And I went into the dean and I told him that I'm quitting. And I don't remember exactly how this went, but I had started an intimacy with one of the women in my class, and she's like, you're quitting? I'm coming over. And whatever happened between us, I'm not going to be explicit on that. She was very convincing, and I didn't quit. I decided to stay. In reflection, and this was part of our karma, part of my dharma, and don't regret it. I would fall in love with this woman, and we would date for 4 years. So through schooling, and then as luck would have it, I lived in Langley. She lived in Vancouver, and I'm not going to say her name because I don't have permission and haven't asked for that. So let's call her Bob. Bob was, she's one of my soulmates. I love Bob very much. And my belief on soulmates is that we have many soulmates in this life. I've been fortunate to have love and intimacy with many of my soulmates. I do believe I'll have one soulmate that'll be the mother of my children, which is a little bit more of an engaged soul contract. And I'm still in good relationship with Bob. We message one another on major holidays and our birthdays just to check in and send love and prayers. Our relationship, me and Bob, it was fiery, to be honest, really fiery. I'm a Libra, fairly equanimous by nature, though I have that Scorpio extremism to me. And she was an Aries, which is the exact opposite of my sign in the zodiac system. She was super fiery, very stimulating for me, very inspiring for me. I was at a time in my life where my mind was mostly like scientifically oriented. And quick side note here, and we'll get back to that. My next addiction after steroids, because I stopped doing steroids when I went to dental hygiene school, I was this like puffed up 230-pound guy. I was like, oh, I'm intelligent now. I want to be a smart guy. I would even wear fake glasses without any lenses. And I was like, I'm going to get Dextrogen or Adderall. You know this? The study drug with like pharmaceutical methamphetamines in there. Okay, yeah, I'm going to get this. So I started taking that, often taking too much because it's very pleasurable to do so. And I would study for like 10 hours a day. And I would go to the library and read all of the sciences. I would read many things, history and spirituality, but I really loved science at that time. So my mind was becoming, it was hyper masculine, object oriented from all the steroids. And then I got into all the studying, and then my weight dropped down to like 130. So I basically looked like an anorexic person because I would just take the Dextrogen and study all day and hardly eat. So I'd swung the pole in the opposite direction and gone to the extreme, as I sometimes do. And my orientation and the way that I was navigating the world was often quite objective and scientism. but I have a spiritual core. I have a soul, so I can say that I've always been spiritual, and there's hints of it throughout my entire life, even though I didn't resonate with Christianity when I was young. A relationship to Source, God itself, was always present in my life in various ways. I had started exploring the Zen philosophies as more of a developed practice and meditation, less of like a good meditation practice and more like smoking weed and sitting in the dark or listening to music, if you want to call that meditation. By my definitions of true meditation, not so much, but entering into beautiful states of reflection and these kind of things were happening at that time, but largely in denial of many spiritual things, which is super funny looking back to where I am now, because I pushed away particular things like the zodiac. Bob was very into the zodiac and talking about our designs and how they relate to one another, and I was in denial that I was all the things that my design told me, because I was in denial of who I was at the soul level. I was acting so much out of my ego that I didn't resonate with those things because I wasn't living in accordance with them. And Bob was very intuitive, and she helped me to find my path, as we both did for one another. She introduced me to my very first yoga class. She introduced me to conscious connected breathwork and breathwave lineage. She helped me to come back into spirituality. And she was the most important person in my life for a long time, because I went away to school and didn't know no one out there. And then I came home and I didn't resonate with the old friend groups that I had. So when I came home, it was just me and her. And we had a lot of friction, and we were great, you could say, like twin flames or revealers of one another's soul imbalances. So we showed one another where we were out of alignment with who we are, and our shadows and all that we needed to see and heal came out. We went through multiple stages to break up. We tried multiple times, and we found it hard to release our cords and attachments to one another. And ultimately, we ended. We had our final breakup, which, funnily enough, we had both decided to go on a trip to Costa Rica together to do ayahuasca. This is something that I had first done when I was 25. I went out to Peru alone. And I was so passionate about it that I wanted to bring her. And though we had both broken up and went our separate ways for several months, we both didn't want to give up our tickets. So we both went as exes and did ayahuasca together, which was a really deep healing for us. I remember her having some challenging experiences, and I was able to support and hold space for her, and this was incredibly healing for us as exes, to be able to put aside our differences for a time and focus on the deeper connection we had and to support one another. And then we broke up, and this shattered me. Still to this day, one of the most challenging emotional experiences that I've ever been through. And it literally took me down. I was standing, and it was like a lightning bolt hit me. My whole system buckled out, and it was like my nervous system wasn't capable, or was just on the threshold of being capable of expressing and experiencing that level of emotion. So we break up, and I don't have any friends, and I'm alone, and at one point this is devastating. On another point, this was my deep surrender to spirituality and God that I needed, and this is when I started religiously practicing every day and every night yoga. I had been practicing yoga, qigong, and breath to various capacities, for sure working out on a regular basis every day. But her introductions to these practices from me, I had now taken on as a part of my life. I had learned about many esoteric things like Kundalini and immediately resonated and been like, yeah, I'm going to do this process of raising my Kundalini and I'm going to do this and do this. And I was working with psychedelics and meditation and all these practices. I didn't ever want to hurt somebody the way that I hurt her. And I recognized my immature sexuality and the way that I would unconsciously manipulate conversations and gaslight her and not support her dreams was things that I could work on. So I went into a dedicated year of celibacy, which ended up being almost 2 years of celibacy to begin the process of healing my sexuality and the unconsciousness that was living in there. And I continued on in the dental hygiene career, though I only worked a few days right off the bat. Went back into construction, being more comfortable with that, continuing my education in school, studying neuroscience and many other things for years, doing my best to get out of that career. Did coaching with Paul Chek. I would continue to work dental hygiene for many years, and it taught me a lot, even though, from day one I knew that I had a lot of resistance towards it. It wasn't the thing that I knew I wanted to do, but god damn, the pain teacher can speak pretty strong and can give some real good lessons when you're doing things you don't want to do, but that's what we need sometimes, from the polarization of the steroids and the hyper masculinization to a career which is mostly women. This just humbled me and taught me a level of humility to be a teeth cleaner. I mean, there's more to it than that if I want to press it up. We understand the pathophysiology of the mouth, TMJ disorders. At the level I'm at now, the mental emotional relationships between clenching and grinding and what can be caught in the fifth chakra, the throat center. I gave needles into people's mouths, and I learned a lot from my work in dental hygiene about balance, about caring for people, for being a healer, for understanding my energy field. I remember when I first started private practice, because I had been so isolated and out of social relationships and emotional expression and all these things, and I'm working and I'm like, why do I feel so much negativity when I work? And I realized that almost everybody who comes to a dentist doesn't want to be there. There's resistance in their field, so they're in a state where they're resistant to be there. And they're experiencing pain and discomfort, for many people at least. And then they're watching TV to dissociate. And this is in their field, their auric field, and this is interacting with my field. So when someone's emitting negativity in their auric field, I'm experiencing that, especially when you're touching their body. There's direct contact of the physical and the energetic. So I had to learn a lot about myself and how to conduct myself in an environment where there's a lot of negativity and resistance, and be positive and a light. I develop all kinds of routines over the years between every patient to clear my energy field, to go in the washroom and do a headstand, to get myself back into presence, to do a lot of yoga to help with the imbalances in my spine from being bent over all day. I developed a level of sensitivity. There's a level of presence one needs to have when they work in somebody's mouth. You're cleaning under their gums, which are often inflamed with a sharp tool. They got a tongue, which is like a guard dog pushing you away. Their mouth is filling with saliva, and for most of the population, they're very uncomfortable and they can't do this very well. They're not really paying attention to the process. I'm working with my hands. My feet are working pedals. I'm tracking how they're doing in the, how much water's in their mouth, but also mentally, emotionally, how much pain is going through them. There's a sensitivity that is developed in this. And also a way of I'm giving people pain as my job, and not like a tattoo artist where they're like, this is part of the process. Most people don't want to experience it. So it's a very unique form of perhaps one of the few people who torture people for a living but get paid for it in our modern society. Yeah. And part of my teaching, when I really struggled is when I disconnected from my heart because I didn't want to be there, so I wouldn't have empathetic communication with somebody. And it's really good. It was really good for me to do something I didn't want to do in a way that it was not the preferable thing to do, but it was helping me to get to where I wanted to go. So there was this like initial resistance that would happen every day as a general process, and then a relationship I could have to that, where there was an opportunity each day to surrender or to develop a way of working with my breath or working with my yoga or working with some kind of internal process of positivity that helped me to maintain my balance or to help me to feel like I'm moving forward with my dreams and my dream affirmative life. Yeah. Okay, so all that's going on there, and jumping a little bit over here, I'm at this point where I haven't fully dealt with in what some traditions call my unconscious source urge or my unconscious death urge. Still, there's so much pain and blocked energy in my body that it's hard to be present. And the pattern that I've had in hanging myself in suicidal ideation of my weak mind is when it's too much, I want to kill myself. That's where my mind goes, which is from a past life where I've hung myself, which is why I came into this life with my cord wrapped around my neck, yeah? So what I was mostly unconsciously doing at another time in my life was to take more and more psychedelics, 5 grams, 10 grams, 5 tabs of acid, 12 tabs of acid, taking extremely high levels. And this wasn't unconscious. I was consciously exploring, and many good things were coming of it. But I was unconsciously wanting to be in spirit, wanting to be dissociated, wanting to be detached in an unhealthy way, because the amount of pain and emotion in my system that was unacknowledged and unexpressed and suppressed and repressed was becoming so high. I was working with breathwork techniques and yoga, and I was beginning to use them every single day religiously. I got thousands of hours of practice, and I was doing my healing work, but there was still this pattern of using increasing amounts of psychedelics. And one of the culminations of this was I would do a lot of psychedelics, and I would take a lot of DMT at the peak, and I would construct it. Like at the peak, I would take a bunch of nicotine gum and I would smoke a bunch of weed, and then I would do the DMT as like this skyrocketing plateau experience. Yeah. And one Christmas of all days, yeah, I'm back at my family home, and I go up to my bedroom, what was my bedroom when I was younger, take out a big water bong, and then I put a bunch of DMT in it, and I go to smoke it. And when you smoke DMT, it's got a low burning point, low burning point, which means it's really fragile and unstable in heat, I think would be the right way. Which means if you bring a lighter up to it, it'll melt before it burns. So you can't really smoke it because it doesn't create the smoke. So a certain technique to work with is to put it in some ash or some ganja, and then to light that. And then as that burns, as you're inhaling, it'll light the DMT, and then you can smoke it. I knew this, and I had done DMT like 100 times ish before this, working with increasing levels of that. And I had many blast off experiences. There's something known as like crossing the threshold. If you don't do enough, you get to this like interim area where you may experience degrees of geometric patterns, but you don't break through. And when you break through, it's like going through a portal to a different dimension, a different timeline. You might meet aliens or ancestors and any number of experiences, yeah? So I'm very familiar with what it is to break through. And I try multiple times with the ash, and I just keep messing it up. So finally I don't know how to, I don't think it really matters. Say 5 times the dose, say 10 times the regular dose, say 50 times. I put a lot in there out of stupidity and the unconscious source urge, you know? As soon as I hit it, such a big dose, my experience, what I understand, my heart immediately stopped. And I blast off. My body collapses. I drop the bong. As I mentioned, I've been through many breakthrough experiences before. This was 100x compared to all those other experiences. And what unfolds in the first few moments is just a level of intensity and vibration, which I can't express, but I see or feel or get the essence of my life, my future. And I see my dad die, and I experience the emotions. I see my mom die. I see myself meet my partner, and I feel holding her hand as she gives birth. I see her as an old woman. I'm holding her hand in the hospital. I see various members of my family dying or getting divorced. I see my own death. And then I go beyond. I see civilizations rising and falling, past lives, this life, that life. I'm still unpacking. And I come to this point, and it's like an infinite voice is speaking to me, and I don't understand it. But an essence that I got when coming back is, isn't this everything that you've always wanted? And that has continued to come back again and again. But ultimately, my soul shot back into my body. And my heart, a big gasp of coming back in. I feel my heart begin to pulse. I'm still really in the medicine when I come back. I look at my body and it's deformed, and I'm horrified thinking that I've deformed my whole body. Fortunately, that begins to fade as the DMT experience isn't that long. And immediately I suppress and repress that, and I go downstairs, didn't tell my parents, and carried on. I don't know how. Oh well. I have a lot of skill in working with psychedelics and getting high and functioning in universities and schools. So maybe I just have a capacity. When you're high all the time, people just expect you to be weird and high. Maybe that's it right there. But I couldn't simply express and repress that. And it took me 2 years to unpack it to the degree where I could think about it, because what would happen when I would bring my mind back to processing that, my body would become weak and want a seizure, like go on the ground and shake, because it was like giving myself trauma. There was so much high intensity information and energy coming through that it was like too much for my system. So it took me multiple years just to be able to think about it. And I'm very fortunate. That I've come back from death experience like this multiple times. I joke that God's like, do you not get it? You keep dying. I keep sending you back. You're not done yet. So this is part of what helped me to heal, part of what helped me to heal that unconscious death urge and choose life. And this was a pivotal moment in me saying that I'm done with things being too intense and wanting to leave my body. I choose to live. The quote that people say, "Wani wachielo, wani wachielo, wani wachielo." Wani wachielo means I want to live. And my understanding is, without a developed will to live, the impulse of the ego, the impulse of the weak mind, the impulse is, it's the fundamental Buddhist teaching of attraction and aversion. We will become attracted to the pleasurable things, most particularly the lower level sense pleasures of power, sex, and money, and will become aversive. We'll become aversive to negative or discomforting stimuli, so that when things get too challenging, we'll have patterns. My pattern was, I can cheat this by leaving this life, which I know to be foolery now. So the development of purpose and the willingness to experience suffering is something that really started in a more developed way at this point. And my will to live began to develop, because in that download of information, I saw my path. Couldn't really recollect it in the moments coming after 2 years to begin to unpack part of it. Still unpacking it, will be for the rest of my life and lives to come. And it still guides me to this day, because of what I'll share moving forward about, isn't this what you've always wanted? There's so many things that showed me that I have always wanted that I've denied from myself. And it showed me what I really want as a silver cord towards my spiritual unfolding, towards my soul's path. Now, it wasn't that long after this that I went to my first peyote ceremony, an all-night prayer ceremony, water drum beating, praying. I'm praying for my purpose. Right before this, my will to live is very strong. You can't say that I had completely weak will for time before this. Since my early 20s, I had gone out into the forest for multiple days fasting and doing psychedelics and these kind of things. But it wasn't stable enough, my will to live through the difficulties. And before that peyote ceremony, I took myself out for over 10 days fasting with water, and did a big mushroom journey at the end of it. Bought a prayer book, or received a prayer book in some way, and I would read different prayers from multi-faith traditions. Something was pulling me. I was still alone. I had broken up with my partner and didn't reconnect with friends. Wouldn't say I was devastated in my isolation, because that's what I had known for most of my life. And there is a great level of comfortability I have in that. Still reading, going to libraries lots, no longer taking the Dextrogen, healed from that addiction. Never took an addiction so far that I went to rehab. Always was able to pull myself out when it got dark enough. So I'm at that peyote ceremony praying for my purpose, doing many of the things that I'm doing today, but on my own and in small ways, like yoga and qigong and breath work. Trying to do timelines here. I'm not so good at timelines, but we're looking at about 8 years ago. And then I met a guy who sees me doing qigong, and he starts doing qigong. We look at one another and we smile, and I talk to him later, and he asked me, I was like, "Oh, do you do qigong? What's your practice like?" I was like, "It's kind of like this mix. I do qigong, I do yoga, I do breath work." And he's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "I'm a yoga teacher. I teach qigong and breath work." And he's 10 years my senior, and he's doing all the things that I do, but in a more developed way as his workspace and not just as his personal practice. We immediately have a spark. And he asked me to meet up with him at a festival, the first festival that I'd gone to in Squamish. Squamish was a resonant place for me. I used to especially when I was doing a lot of psychedelics, I wouldn't do them in my home or around the spaces that I was in. I would drive to different locations and rent hotels and then take ridiculous amounts of psychedelics in these hotel rooms. And over time, I stopped going to all different places, like Harrison Hot Springs and all these ones. And I would go to Squamish. I really like Squamish, so I stayed at a bunch of their hotels and would do a lot of psychedelics. I remember even having visions about like, being in Squamish and doing all these martial arts and all these things, which, you know, spoiler alert, I ended up moving to Squamish, and all those things came true. As another one of those future downloads that I have had many times in my life received that I would go on to live. Anyways, I'm at the festival, and he's there, and there's this guy named Robin Clements leading a breathwork ceremony of the conscious connected breathwork lineage, breathwave, which I had been introduced to before from my previous partner, Bob. Beautiful Bob. And in that ceremony, there's an opening of the inner sky and God's clear voice. I was like, do you want to take on this pathway? And I'm like, yes. And after that ceremony, the mentor who came into my life was like, do you want to mentor under me? And I'm like, yes. I've already said yes. And he's like, okay, I'm leading a retreat in whatever amount of time. Come up. And we go out past Pemberton, up the Inshucks Forestry Service Road to the Shaktian territory. And we do a 3-day men's retreat with breath work and hot tubs from the natural hot springs in the area. And it goes amazingly well. I love the breath space. Without training, I felt very comfortable being in this. Felt very comfortable co-facilitating and working with him. And then I met 2 indigenous elders, Vern Chanos and his partner Sylvia, or as I know her, Mumsy. And this is a beautiful opening and relationship that me and the breathwork facilitator develop, and we create a company together. We start doing breathwork circles together. I'm just so in love that there's an opportunity for me to do what I love, that no payment involved. I just show up to these things, driving from Langley all the way up to Whistler for a 2-hour event. We do events in Squamish. We do events in Vancouver. Everything's going great. And then out of the blue, I mean, not completely out of the blue, this guy had a child. I was there for his child's birth in the hospital. But he makes a judgment call with him and his partner to relocate to Bali. They had more of a relationship with Bali, and she had taught there for many years. I did my yoga teacher training with his partner in Bali. But he left really suddenly. Like, he told me, and then within a month, and they were gone. And then I was like, okay, now what? He's like, well, why don't you just do what I'm doing? Continue on the circles. You know, he was teaching one-on-one breath work in studios. He's like, why don't you do that? And for whatever reason, I was like, oh yeah, all his clients will just come be my clients. And all the clients from the breathwork circles will come to my circles. Why not, right? So I moved to Squamish, quit my job, and don't have a business plan. I have no business previous knowledge. I'm just like this often spiritually bypassing, often dissociating because I'm still healing from my desire to be not just in the spirit realm. So not having so much grounding in the physical or realistic expectations, business modeling, or really anything. But that's what got me out there. So following that intuitive pull. I could have moved to Whistler or Vancouver, but Squamish is the one that called. Had an expectancy that some of those clients would come over, and maybe one came over, if not 0. So for the first 6 months, I put myself out in 2 studios, one in Vancouver and one in Squamish. And I'm just like racking in the bills from the place that I'm renting. Then I'm not making money. And 6 months pass and the pandemic hits. I'm winding myself down into a nice, beautiful debt. And the pandemic hits, and still like a wild card that I am. I'm like, okay, I'm going to close down my clinics. Um, I'm going to get like a pound of mushrooms, and then I'm just going to go to Salt Spring and just be in meditation by the ocean. And that's what I did. Brought myself into a beautiful state of alignment, received many more future downloads of systems that I would go on to train in, such as the Kriya Yoga system, in the lineage of Babaji and Yogananda. And in the next few years, so much happens. It becomes very dense, and in sharing my story, I'm not really sure where to go from here. I know there's some major points that I want to touch on. Just as like a preview, we'll see which ones I actually go into. We're looking at when I moved to Squamish, coming up on 6 years. In that time, I was already doing a lot of these trainings, but increased my level of knowledge and training in the conscious connected breathwork lineage working. I would eventually come to work with both the mentor I spoke about and Robin Clements of the Breathwave lineage, as well as other teachers. Working and training with various yoga systems. As I mentioned, the Kriya Yoga system, which I may talk about a little bit more later. Working with Qigong, both in shamanic energy medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, medical and alchemical Qigong systems, such as Neigong. I had gone to Peru when I was about 25, and then later Costa Rica. And I met a curandero ayahuasca teacher that was local-ish, and started working with that tradition, doing plant dietas, kind of like teasing, apprenticing in some way, but working on my own healing first, and continuing to work with ayahuasca and traveling out to Peru to continue on with those healings. And lots of training in meditation, light body meditation, Vipassana meditation, and doing 6 Vipassana stays at the centers, and continuing on in a really good way with a regular practice for the first bit. Now it's a mixed practice because I have so many systems that I work with, and I don't just do the Vipassana practice for full transparency there. So there's a lot happening on that front, business front. Doing my best in the first few years, struggling a lot, opening myself up from just being a breathwork facilitator to including the coaching that I had already been doing for years, move into the space of podcasting, to YouTubing, leading workshops, to leading retreats, led a training program, continuing to expand myself in all these different ways here, making a lot of collaborations with different individuals, working with men's work groups, starting my own men's work for a period, a lot of collaborations with different breath workers, different yogis, different healing systems. Things are really opening up and expanding in my life in this time. A few key ones to track. I'm a part of the Kriya Yoga lineage. So this is an authentic lineage of realized spiritual masters. This isn't just like a yoga teacher training. This comes from Babaji, which is you could think of him as like a messianic figure, like a Jesus that guides people through practices to help them grow through the different cycles. And this is a practice and process for self-realization to become God realized in this lifetime. It's a householder tradition. It was given from Babaji, re-emerge. This is, the old Kriya Yoga is the teachings that is the Yoga Sutras, that is the teachings from the Bhagavad Gita. These are the practices that were, they say, revived in a modern way in the 1800s as the Babaji, which is a being who's gone beyond death, who is often seen in the Himalayas, comes from cycle to cycle to offer teachings to help individuals to go through, came to Lahiri Mahasaya and gave him the practice of Kriya. I can't share the teachings of what the individual practices are because this is meant to be given through initiation so that it's an unbroken lineage and taught in a good way. And it's been passed on from individuals who have reached self-realization. For example, it was moved to Swami Sri Yukteswar Giri, Srimat Bhupendranath Sanyal. It went to Swami Sachinanda Giri. Many people know Paramahamsa Yogananda, which was passed on to Paramahamsa Hariharananda, and the current lineage holder is Paramahamsa Prajnananda, who I've had the fortunate experience of spending multiple days, multiple times in an ashram with, and he's one of the most important people in my life because of what he has offered me spiritually, karmically, as an example of a divine being living in human form. The amount of light that comes out of his eyes, it's like looking into God himself, herself, however you want to articulate that, beyond words. And I mentioned our auric fields, the energy that surrounds us, and how I like to cultivate a certain level of energy around me. His auric field is so strong, big, and beautiful. It's like he comes into a room and the whole space becomes beautiful. My mind becomes attuned to meditation. Like I can just rest in the center of my being. I can know my soul. By looking at him, I see truth. I see all my blind spots and shadows come up because he's a light of truth and love. And in that unconditional light of love, I can see myself more clearly. So the role model that he offers, both in the form of flesh and even beyond when I'm not with him, feeling his presence as a meditative anchor, something I can attune to. It's like, do you know somebody you love? You can feel them. Have you had this before? When they struggle, you feel it. There's like a heart-to-heart connection that happens in the field between you two because of that soul connection. And having a lineage and a connection to Paramahamsa Prajna is just like that. His spiritual heart and my spiritual heart have a relationship. So there's an anchoring towards his light, and he can't make me enlightened. I have to do my own work. It's not like that. But a guru can offer a lot of light, which is one of the definitions of what a guru is, to be a light bearer, someone who can cast the light in the shadows to guide the way, just like a guide. So the Kriya system is not something that I offer because this is not something that I'm qualified to offer, but it's a part of my personal practice, part of my personal path towards self-realization. At some point in my journey, I received the name Aya. And that name means a lot to me. And I don't mind if you call me Zach. Zach for me represents my ego. Zach for me represents the name that my parents gave me, who I love very much. Zach for me represents the memories and their emotions of all the times that people have called me Zach, which is like a lot of my early childhood. So when individuals call me Zach, it like calls forth that energy. So my preference is for Aya, but I'm not someone who is very pushy on that because ultimately both are my names, and it's good to be reminded of both at this point in my life. But Aya for me in some ways is the opposite of Zach, more soul connected. Even the name Zach is consonant, vowel, consonant, whereas I is the inverse. It's vowel, consonant, vowel, which has different way of vibrating as you speak it. And just as Zach is connected with my ego, it vibrates at that level. And Aya is connected with my soul, and it opens me up in a whole different way to receive life. And it's not in some sense just my name. It's also a homage to my teachers, ayahuasca and Shivaya, which for me represent Aya Om, which is one of the it's my business name. And Aya Om is a technology for me, meaning it's my name and then Om. So I'm saying my name, my individual soul, and then Om is the pranava. It's the universal sound, like the Great Spirit. So I'm calibrating or attuning my soul, my individual soul, and any obscurations in my vibration with the universal sound of Om each time I say Aya Om. And I will do this sometimes as a meditation, just like some people chant Satnam, Satnam, Satnam as they do breath of fire or mantric practices. I will chant Aya Om as a way to harmonize my vibration, yeah? But it's also, as I mentioned, a homage to my teacher Shivaya, which represents the masculine pathway, in that connection to source and self-realization is a product of our own spiritual unfolding through no other mechanism by an internal relationship, resourcing ourselves with the ultimate source, the greatest resource, source consciousness itself. Whereas ayahuasca represents the more shamanic and feminine pathway of communing with the earth like a tantric being, going into the manifest reality, Purusha and Prakriti, as a shamanic path, relating to the plants and these plant teachers as another pathway towards self-realization, soul realization, and expression, yeah? And this is part of the teachings of my life to harmonize these, what is often historically been separate paths of soul and spiritual development, and bringing them into one by harmonizing and weaving various different traditions in a good way with love and respect, and sharing this with the world. I am, as I've mentioned, a part of traditions, traditional lineages, which I keep like sanctified, sacred, like in a little sanctuary in their own special way, and I don't veer from them as my teachers have taught me, when practicing them in a certain way at a certain time. And what has been fundamental to my nature and spiritual growth that is authentic and I've recognized to be one of my deepest soul teachings and things that I can offer this world is a way of harmonizing various different lineages and traditions with my own creativity that God has given me to create something new. At some level, I don't want to do this because if the teachings are already there and the lineages, why break them? What do I know? But I have to be honest with myself and what has helped me and what feels authentic. So this is part of my design of being a trailblazer in the Gene Keys, trusting my intuition and knowing what I'm here to do, yeah? So there's a great sensitivity when we hold a tradition, great sensitivity to how we conduct ourselves, what is in right relationship. But I feel it's a natural process of life. There are things that continue on as they continue on, and we are well to protect them, a lineage for its sacredness, and as best as we can through the millennia to keep its teachings intact. And there is a force of creativity, undoubted a force of creativity, that helps to evolve traditions for however long, maybe just for a period or a cycle. But these are both important. The way I see it, expressed in a different way, there are certain traditions, say the food traditions, the cuisines of multiple cultures. Isn't it so amazing that we have access to all of these in our current world? Think about from generation to generation how much access they've had to all the different spices and types of food. It's great that there is sushi as it was taught and as best as we know it in its purity. And isn't it beautiful when we can mix and match different cultures, different spices, and all the things that have the sheer amount of diversity in our cuisine. This is a good thing to me. It's the same thing with spirituality. There is a sense at which we can have the lineages in their strictness and in their exactness, and a sense for the bifurcation and creativity that comes. I'll speak more on Aya Om and my path and what I'm here to offer as I share a little bit more about some of the teachings in the last few years. So I mentioned that I went to Shaktin with my breath mentor, and he introduced me to Vern and Mumsy Shanos. And my first meeting with them, we did a sweat lodge ceremony and a nipi, and the Lakota people, or one of the indigenous peoples of North America, they had a messianic figure, just like a Babaji, just like a Jesus, who came to them. This was white buffalo calf woman. And these messianic figures come to various cultures at specific times to offer them specific teachings and practices that will help them to get through the next incarnational cycle, through a challenge, whatsoever you have. And white buffalo calf woman, there's a whole story about how she presented herself, very deep and meaningful, to two warriors, and gave them 7 sacred ceremonies. The Anipi, or the sweat lodge ceremony, is one of those ceremonies. The Humblecha, or crying for a vision, the vision questing ceremony, where you're alone, where you're without food or water, asking for a vision from Creator. Listening to creation is one of those ceremonies. As is the sun dance. This is known to be one of the highest indigenous ceremonies for its spiritual power and importance in leading the people. These are 3 of them. There's other ones in there. These are the 3 that I've had the fortunate experience to be a part of. I had been to sweat lodges before Vern Shanos, but he had come to be a major guide in that he allowed me to be a fire keeper, to tend the sacred fire that is like the sun, that helps to give light and heat to the grandfather stones that go in those sweat lodge and nipi ceremonies. And there's a lot that goes into those ceremonies, the teachings that have come from countless medicine people and for thousands of years, to the life-giving trees, the tall standing ones. And the tall standing ones, the trees, have so much intelligence in how they live, rooted in the ground, growing towards the light, branches high up into the heavens. They are beautiful models of what it is to be in right relationship, to take on the carbon dioxide, which is poisonous to humans in large amounts, and to offer oxygen, which in the amounts they give and sustain in the environment and atmosphere gives us the life breath. And these trees offer themselves in these sacred fires so that the Anipi ceremony, which is the womb, the structure of the ceremony, a tent-like structure, when enclosed in complete darkness, most individuals curled up in fetal positions in a seated way, uncomfortable, just like the womb, praying to Creator. These ceremonies are beyond words in their power, their sacredness, and the teachings go on. And every sweat lodge is a little different. I tell people it's like coming into somebody else's home. Come to that ceremony with a beginner's mind, without your idea of how it should go, and listen to the land. Listen to the teachings of the individuals who know those ceremonies, particularly the lodge holder, the medicine people, and the elders. Like going to another country, pay respect, be in communication with the people, with the land. Listen deeply. And everyone's different. In general, there's 4 different rounds, each with a different thing. And I won't divulge too much more of the protocols and going into that, because that's not the essence of this episode. But Vern taught me how to run a certain lodge, which is from the teachings that he received. So I went from being a firekeeper to one day he asked me to sit beside him and pour a round. And this continued where I would pour just 1 round at a time. At first it was the first round, then the second round, then the third round, and the fourth round, then the first and the second round, and on and on. For years this happened, and then Vern got sick. Vern got cancer, and the disease progression went very quick. I remember seeing him in the hospital, and he had lost a lot of his weight. And he did something that day which at first I rejected and pushed aside. I mean, after a moment of happiness, he passed the bucket, which meant he offered me the permission to pour Sweat Lodge on my own and to pour his lodge. And immediately, yes, happiness, and then pushing it aside, because in my opinion, in my knowing, at the level of my conscious mind, I didn't want this. I didn't vision board this. And then I inherit this like a responsibility that comes a certain weight in it. Now I'm a white person who hasn't received, in my opinion, enough training to be doing this. And it comes with a certain, there's like controversy around it because of what white people have done with the traditional ceremonies in Indigenous to take those ceremonies or take them from them. Sometimes taking them from them by killing them if they're in them, or ripping them out by their hair. And I'm offered this ceremony, and there's a lot that comes with that, and many details I'm just not going to share in here because it's not feeling like the place. But immediately I pushed that away, and thankfully Mumsy is still there. Mumsy is still there to guide me, and she continues to mentor me, and I am so grateful for her as a guide, like a spiritual grandmother. Before Vern passed, he helped me with 3, and I would later do another one, and then later do another one, totaling 5. But he helped me with 3 hambrechas, or vision quests. 3 opportunities for 4 days to go out into nature without food and water, just to pray, just to give gratitude. These fasts, like my 10-day fast, like the ones I took myself on in my 20s, like many other opportunities in my life that I took to take care of myself, to develop my relationship with Creator, have offered me the vision of how to move forward, just like that DMT journey. This for me is what it means to lead a spiritual life, or at least one dimension of it. It means that I'm not making my primary decisions in life, the big decisions that are my big steps forward in orientation and motivation, via this is the best financial decision, or this is the best decision for my personal power in life, or this is going to get me more pleasure in sex. It's like I'm going to come into stillness, and as best as I can, I'm going to quiet my own ego, and I'm going to listen. And I'm going to listen to Creator, and Creator's going to give me a vision or guidance as to what to do and when. So in as best as I can in the last few years, this has been my way of orienting my life as a spiritual being towards living in right relationship, is trusting the visions that I receive from these to guide me. After doing a number of these visions, it becomes clear to me what the next steps are, yeah? But it's not just the visions, it's also dreams. It's also the medicine ceremonies. It's also the meditations. This, for me, are pieces of what it means to live a spiritual life. Live a life guided by God. And the more I do, the more I let go of security. I mean, based on beliefs about security, like most people feel they have security if they have enough money in the bank, or these kinds of things, which ultimately don't protect you, because in any moment something can happen to that. I mean, I got security, but it's like divine security. It's faith in God kind of security. It's like the knowing that even if I die, I know where I'm going kind of security. That kind of security is there. But the other securities, the more I live the spiritual life and take walks on my road, the more I have to take each breath and each step as a conscious experience. Very aware of what my prayer is, what's in my field, right? the actions I'm taking, the emotions, the thoughts, the beliefs, my motivations, where are they from? Where's my organizing principle into what goals, which hierarchies am I following and am I a part of, yeah? One peyote ceremony I did, I received a vision that I would do the sun dance. I'm not going to talk a lot about the nature of that because it's a big ceremony with a lot going on, and I actually don't know all the protocols in and around sharing about those protocols, so I think it's best not to say a lot. I can share that it's a multi-day fasting ceremony in which you're doing the inipi ceremonies every day and you're dancing. You're dancing basically from sun up till sundown, and why we do this is to build our mind like a warrior, is to pray, is to be in continuous prayer without food or water, and there's a level of sacrifice that happens, and this is part of the equation of prayer. In the indigenous teachings, there's a giving and receiving of prayer, which is in harmonization with the 7 Hermetic principles and many other systems of universal principles that help to guide people to interact with the matrix mind of God, which is reality. That if we want something, we can ask for it and it's immediately given. But if we ask for something and we want it, we have to have a certain level of alignment with that. And with that level of alignment, that might come with a certain level of, you need to stabilize your mind on that desire. If you're constantly desiring this and this and this is creating desires and they're immediately received. But there's like a time lag between the desire and the divine timing and alignment of that as it manifests in the physical reality. If we were in spirit, you would immediately think something and it would immediately occur. But we've chosen to have a human experience for many reasons. One is to experience body, mind, and the space-time. So we have desires and they do come true, but we wait, and there's an organization due to our karma and many other factors that happen, destiny lines, and what we came here to do, our practices and themes we're exploring. So we have these desires and we have these prayers and we have the power, the potential. We are made in the image of God, meaning we have the creative essence of God to move mountains and to do remarkable things, just as many figures in the past have done, showing their powers by walking on water or healing people, bringing people back from the dead or dying and coming back. History is patterned with people who have taken universal principles and what it is to really be human, showing us that being human is quite spectacular. But if we have a prayer, there's a capacity we have to hold that prayer in our mind, like self-hypnosis, to push away all the other distractions. Many people don't live in faith. They live out of harmony with reality, and they have a number of beliefs, limiting beliefs, negative beliefs that prevent them from seeing and knowing their innate essence that is soul, that is divine. And because of this, there's a lot of illusion and delusion and imbalance in life, and there's a lot of greed and lower dense emotions that keeps people trapped in cycles of pain and suffering. So when a sun dancer pledges the sun dance, and they do this for 4 years, and they take on pain, they're rewriting a lot of the script that I mentioned earlier about the program patterns of aversion and attraction. The natural orientation of ego to desire what is 5 sense pleasure and to orient away from what is discomforting by willingly accepting suffering for a higher purpose of love. This is what Jesus has done on the cross, yeah? This is a way of accessing Christ consciousness. This is a way of overriding the selfish programs of self-orientation, the ego first, and allowing for a different template of interacting with the world, which is more orientated to what Paul Chek calls the optimal decision, what is not just best for you, but your family, your community, and the earth, and all beings. And this is such a powerful process and practice, and I'm still in the wake as I've just done my first year. Just an introduction to these ways of it remolding my mind, my orientation and access of how I interact with the world, my purpose here. It's expanding like the heavens opening up. It's opening up my mind and vision to see more of what I saw in that DMT vision. But I denied to myself. But you remember what I said at the end of that? Isn't this what you've always wanted? Things that I've denied from myself are opening up with the confidence that I have. I left the Sundance and all I wanted to do was praise God, so I didn't go back to any work, and it's been a month and I still haven't gone back. And I would regularly have a kind of fear around finances because I'm not making any money and it's out of the blue, so I didn't plan for this. And it's not like I'm going to go under. I can pull money for other sources, but I wouldn't generally take myself into the red like this, yeah? But there's a level of certainty in my body that says I just want to focus on Creator, and unless Creator and my soul gives me direct guidance to go back to work in as best as I can, I'm just listening moment to moment, breath to breath, step by step for what actions come next. It's not about my will, and as best as I can, it's about God's will. How can I be a better instrument? And I'm letting go of many of the patterns of fear-based conditioning around finances and what I should do with my time and when. And because it's really intense, because a lot's on the line when an individual steps into a container of uncertainty at this level, I'm very mindful. I'm very mindful about what I'm doing. And a lot of my old patterns that are out of alignment, which were patterns of numbing myself, and a lot of the security that comes with having money, when that goes away, there's an intensity that draws, and there's a capacity that I'm experiencing to take all the energy of things that I've been leaking and offer that to God. Offer that with presence to the moment. Because the moment is what is real. It's not the past, not anything I've shared with you. That's not real in the way in which I'm experiencing the tangible reality. So much of the past is the programming, it's the conditioning. You know, I had a vision 2 years ago to do 3 months of ayahuasca in isolation in Peru, and it was too much for me to do at the time because I had my own business, I have overhead, I rent my own place. And I was like, I want to do 3 months. I want to do 3 months, but I can only get off, in my mind, 2 weeks. And I pushed myself. I said, I'm going to do 3 weeks, and then the extended period amounting to about a month away. And it was hard because it was beyond my belief systems of what I thought was possible financially. And I worked really hard to get there. Didn't even quite make enough. I was counting on someone to sublet my place. You know, when you pray these things, you hear these stories about everything working out. Oh my God, I thought that was going to happen when I moved to Squamish. You know, you hear these stories, they're like, I quit my job, I said yes to life, and everything synchronously lined up. When I moved to Squamish, it went to shit, and it went to shit for 6 months, and got harder and harder, but I needed to learn those lessons. And when I went away for those 3 weeks, I thought it would line up. I thought I would get all these things, and it didn't. And I was expecting a big healing and to come from that and to release a lot. And I did a lot of good work, but I went into like a freeze response when I got there. I could hardly move. It's the exact medicine that I needed, but it was not what I expected. And now I'm like, okay, now's my time. I got the vision in my Sundance. I got the vision before to do 3 months down in Peru for next year. And it's at the point where I'm like, I'm going to do it, and I don't care about the suffering that I will take on if need be, because I know this is the right action. And I'm like, how can I make this happen? I'm like, I have the investments in my investments to be able to make this happen. I don't want to pull from my investments for this. I'm going to do my best to manifest the money and make it. But I'm like, no matter what, I'm going to get there. I'm just going to do it. And on some level, it's like, is that a financially irresponsible decision? Well, it depends on whose belief systems, orientations, and approach you're taking. And a lot of the implicit becoming explicit beliefs I had around that were initially, this is a dumb decision. Don't pull from your investments. But the more I understand the vibrational nature of the universe and the universal principles, I look at it in terms of, say, the 7 Hermetic principles. One being everything is vibration, and there's a certain law of cause and effect. What I give is what I receive. So if I can take that time and I can shift my vibrational nature, I've been talking a little bit about my auric field as a result of my physical energy, vitality, my emotions, and my belief system and thoughts. How much work can I get done in that time to rewrite the fundamental belief systems, which are my orientation and access towards life? I've received so much conditioning in my life around fear, around finances, around my power. You know, I mentioned the cord being wrapped around my neck. For most of my life, it's felt like that. Whether or not there's been a noose around my neck from me hanging myself, or being in dental working with people's mouths and wanting to express things which I suppressed, wanting to express my voice, but having a certain level of expression of my truth, because in my understanding, in that past life, why I hung myself was I had so much I wanted to share, but it was controversial stuff, just like I got a lot to share this year. Got a lot to share in this life that's very controversial. It's not the status quo, I'll tell you that. So there can be a certain level of suppression of the natural expression. And I've done enough of that in my life to know that only leads to imbalance. And I don't know what the repercussions are. The more I go into this, repercussions come, they're real. But there's a willingness to go into it. So, what would 3 months be like away? I could rewrite a lot of the programming around my relationship to how I express myself freely, just being on my own without the information and distractions of other people. I'm creating a school that launches next year. I'm going to be a future father in this life. What can I do to release the multi-generational trauma that lives within me? I know healing work. I know the power that I have to help people to heal. In real time, the healing work that I do on myself ripples through my lineage, 7 generations back and forward. Taking a little bit of money out of an investment to heal multi-generational trauma at a time in my life when I'm young and vital, before I have dependence. All of a sudden I start thinking in the now moment, not from the past conditioning, the belief systems of others, but looking towards the positive. Oh, now it becomes like the obvious decision to me that this is the thing to do, rather than being like, oh, this is financially irresponsible. Now, if I tell somebody this, maybe my parents, somebody else, I might not hear the same thing reflected back. But I'm determining my truth. And the more present I am in the moment, connected to my soul, that's where clear guidance comes in. So when there's a certain amount of pressure, like there is right now not working, I have a lot more presence. And in this present moment, I'm challenging old belief systems and extinguishing the fear that keeps me locked in those old patterns of security. Carolyn Mice talks about prostitution as taking any kind of work on that's not related to our sole purpose. And I'm tired of prostituting myself because it leads to self-sabotage. It leads to patterns of addiction with the way that I relate to food and TV and consuming and distracting myself from the present moment awareness, where I have everything I need when I need it. How dare I have doubted God in any one of my moments to not give me a path in each moment where I don't have to do the things I don't want to do. Living so many years in dental hygiene, not wanting to do it, that was my choice. It was my choice to get into that field because I didn't believe in myself and I didn't think Creator would support me financially if I followed my soul. I'm at a point of recognition now that I don't have to go back to that. I don't have to play victim. And I'm tired of self-manipulating myself into that. I'm past my addictive patterns, and I'm in the present moment. And I'm ready to take that 3-month leap and invest that money, even though I'm not making money, even more pressure, because of the confidence I feel in my soul's direction. And this isn't, I mean, there's a way of tracking this, and I can't share too much about the Kriya Yoga system and some of the other lineages. But there's a shift that happens. There's a shift that can happen in an individual where the orientation of energy in the central channel begins to shift so that the magnetization of the soul begins to speak through. Maybe that was just a bunch of word jumble. I think I fumbled that one. Sometimes I speak poetically from the head and lose the heart and the essence of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is my soul is now speaking more clearly through me than my ego, and it comes through a certain level of attunement. This attunement is a vibration like the end of an ohm that I can hear in my subtle body centers. This is my alignment. My primary work is my alignment. It's my state. It's the energy moving through me. This is why I'm so particular, and I mentioned the auric field. This is my primary work. It's not to worry about the circumstances outside of me, but my state. To clear the energies and obscurations, the fears and doubts of myself and those of the environment, which act as triggers for me, like divine mirrors, for me to realize what beliefs I'm holding. So when I clear myself and I'm in a surrendered state, listening to my soul and my guidance, I know that there's a clear pathway, the highest pathway, the pathway of least resistance. This is why I've created, and I don't want to say I created this alone, I've adopted this formula from Bashar ultimately, but changed the languaging on it. This is why the formula for me is align. First step is align with the highest path of Dharma, love, and excitement. Step number 2 is to act upon it without insistence, without attachment, without hesitation. The third step is to culminate my mind in equanimity, positivity, and receptivity. And the fourth step is to clear and create. If something's out of alignment and fear-based beliefs, blockages are in the system, and as best as I can, clearing those, keeping my mind in a state of equanimity so that I can create my life from the highest pathway, from the highest timeline, from the highest perspective, yeah? The universe requires action. Because if we have old belief systems, it's one thing to think our way out of them. It's another to act on the new belief systems which challenge the old belief systems. So right now I'm in that portal of the old belief systems, the fear-based beliefs around money and my ties to them, the prostitution that I have done in the past is tying me those. And I'm challenging them by going, no, I don't need those old sources of income because I have a level of abundance that's waiting for me, which is so beyond anything that I've made with those. And my soul expands in a different direction than those. My soul feels contracted if I go back to those. So I'm challenging the belief each moment by taking actions related to my soul rather than ones based on the safety networks that have created by the old belief systems. And part of what's allowed me to come into a greater level of clarity of listening to my soul was to stop denying my emotions and building a better relationship with the emotions and their expression. Now that's a long conversation about how I got there because it's not one thing. It wasn't just breath work. It wasn't just men's work. It wasn't just dance. It wasn't all these things. But I will share with you 5 primary negative emotions from 5 elemental theory. And the primary emotions that I've dealt with in this life and how they've blocked me so that I could come into greater recognition of my soul and its desires, especially the ones that I had known that I've wanted for my life, but I've been too scared to admit to myself. So 5 elemental theories associated with an emotion, an organ, a spiritual quality, a direction, and much more. The liver is associated with anger. 2 primary pieces of anger that I've worked through in this life is the anger associated with myself and the anger associated to God. From a young kid, I was very angry, outburst anger, blinding rage, punching holes in walls. This was inappropriate. One day, instead of punching a wall, I held my fist back, shaking, and I punched myself in the face and continued to do so, punching my head, my face. This was my first step in controlling my anger in a horribly ineffective pattern. So my parents got less mad at me because I wasn't punching holes in walls, but now I was punching myself. They didn't like that either. I didn't like that either. Eventually, I was able to suppress the anger outbursts so that I just thought negative things. Another great pattern, yeah? So now I've become self-hating, and its outward expression, suppression and repression, really active. I picked up the anger, not just of myself and in myself, but through my father. And he picked up the anger through his parental figures. Multi-generational anger. A lot of it was a thought form entity associated with the war and the incredible amount of darkness. It speaks like this: "You piece of shit." It's self-depreciating, causes suicidal ideations, depression. Like a negative thought form, it's like a leech, leeching on the life force energy. When an individual is disconnected from the soul, these thought form negative entities can affect our light and prevent us from seeing truth, offering us suicidal ideations like "go hang yourself." These kind of multi-generational traumas and thought form entities live in many families. I was at a men's work retreat, and right before that retreat, after 30 years of not feeling an anger at that level, like blind outrage, I did. I hit myself just like I hit myself when I was young. And I was so discouraged with myself. After all the healing work that I did, I'm still a little boy hitting myself, not knowing how to express anger. And I stood in front of a group of people around a fire, and I made a pledge to them. I admitted what I had done, admitted that I felt weak, and I said, I'm going to heal. I'm going to heal because my father has cancer, and in the Chinese medical system, anger is always associated with cancer. I know he experiences that thought form negative entity, and I'm going to heal not just for myself, because I know I'm going to be a father. I've seen it. It was part of that DMT vision, and many other things have shown me. And I don't want to pass this on. So I pledge that I will not pass this on. And if this anger comes, I will remember this moment, and I will stop myself. And sure enough, a few weeks later, blinding rage, stopped myself, broke down and cried, tended to myself, reparented that part of myself. And I realized a lot of that anger too was related to my anger with God because of the poor template for what God is. And I had much of a retemplating through my own experience with Source that's happened through my life, but I was still carrying pieces of conditioning about what it is to relate to God from my early Christian upbringing. And I had an anger for God because I didn't like where I was at. And I was angry at God as if God was Big Daddy in the sky and he was going to make things better. That's the conditioning. When I shattered that template in a proper way, it was no longer anger to God. It was just anger that I was feeling projected outward, Big Daddy in the sky. And I took responsibility for the source inside and my responsibility to make things shift, to deal with my anger, to deal with the parts of my life that are out of balance, that I wasn't dealing with, so I can more boldly step into my truth and the life that I came here to live, and the purpose and the controversial trailblazing things that I came here to do. Anxiety. Anxiety is associated with the heart. I've had a lot of anxiety in sharing this because it's not something I usually share as emotional expression, and I don't usually drink coffee, and I drank a big coffee. So my heart rate has been through the roof and a little bit more sympathetic and jittery than I could have done this, but this is what's coming out. So I'm willing to be authentic in the anxiety and anxiousness of this. I've had anxiety my whole life. Since I was a kid, socializing, public speaking, I was super shy, hiding behind my parents' knees as a little boy. I remember singing, the chord stuff, everything associated with communication and expression, particularly expression of my emotions and singing. Terrifying. I'm working through that because I have a lot of information that guides me that singing is going to be a big part of the way in which I help people to heal. Public speaking, I've already gotten past that. Not that I don't get anxiety, but part of my work has been to guide yoga classes and breathwork classes, and I just push myself out there. I just got to do what I got to do. Socializing, I mentioned finding that optimal balance of the amount of time I need alone to be in my center and then coming out in the world and learning how to interact with people on a human level, an emotional level, as well as the energetic auric levels of how I can stay centered. I had to do a lot of self-knowing to get myself to where I'm at. And I'm still learning, still get anxiety all the time, but it's just like a thing, yeah? In the Chinese medical model, negative emotion is not bad, like sin. It's just the opposite of positive emotion. It's a teacher. It's part of our guidance system. It's part of, the exploration of it is part of what makes us human, makes us grow. Just like pain is like you touch a hot stove, it's giving you guidance. It's not bad. So I welcome this anxiety, and it can be harnessed, and just sensation. Primary worry is associated with the spleen. Money's been a big one, and am I doing this right? So am I doing this right has a lot of conditioning around religious beliefs about right and wrong, sin. This has been in my lineage for some time in Christianity, and, has plagued me consciously and subconsciously. This is a very common theme in many people. Am I doing this right is extinguished when I source my actions and intentions from a very conscious place, from my heart, from my highest good. Part of doing this is time calibrating with my heart, breathing into it, focusing on it, choosing actions out of love, following the formula, and taking time alone where the societal pressures and the ego isn't active. Just being out in nature. Nature doesn't judge me. Vision questing. There's no one sitting there telling me, am I doing this right? It's just me alone for days. That helps me to decondition and condition my mind just in connection with spirit, and allowing the intelligence of the practices of breathing to move intelligent energy through my system, to cultivate it, to culture it so the energy flows more harmoniously in those thought forms, negative thoughts and beliefs about am I doing this right and doing things wrong as sin can begin to dissolve. Acknowledging when I have anxieties and worries and speaking to them extinguishes them when I'm held in community, like the accountability that comes with being in the expansive men's group and these kinds of things. I mentioned a bit about my relationship with money and how I'm not playing into those worries, which can drive the mind into overthinking patterns and relate to survival strategies and acting from a place that isn't love. When I act from love, I know I'm making the right decision, and I know I'll be supported in one way or another. And whatever I go through, whether it's like a big financial win or not, there's a capacity to do the right thing or to do the most aligned thing without needing the security of money. Even if it's hard, like when I went to Peru and things didn't work out, it was the right thing to do. Sadness associated with the lungs. Grievances. One of my primary grievances in this life is loneliness. I've lived a lot of my life in isolation, and when not in like a physical isolation away from people, having a divergent way of perceiving, being a reflector, a rare energetic design, having alternate views, often playing the role of a contrarian, regardless of the environment, just as what I offer those spaces. There's a tendency I have, if someone thinks something or there's a group mind in the space, to naturally want to be the divergent or the devil's advocate. So that comes, it's a good role to have in the larger group, but it can come with a loneliness about being the one off to the side, or just having other radical views and tendencies and a desire for lots of meditation and aloneness. And the way that I'm working with that is to honor my design and what it is to love myself and accept the responsibility of my incarnation and the role that I play, and to release the ways in which I've sought love from other people and have that love come from the unconditional source, from God. And the more that I can soften into that space, which is infinitely available, that sense of loneliness comes aloneness, where there's a capacity to be alone and to be stable and nourished from that place, a natural contentment. And when I'm in that place, which is a lot of the time, but when I'm not in it, it's terrible, is a place of contentment, of being just in love with being. I spend a lot of time just sitting in meditation, not doing anything, just content to be in my own heart and body. And then the final one, fear, associated with the kidneys. Primary fears in this life have been fear of death and the fear of a painful death, or being in large levels of pain. The fear of death, I feel like I did a lot of extinguishing work, dying multiple times and then coming back after meeting source energy that kind of puts a full in that whole, oh shit, kind of, oh, I'm going to die, it's eternal damnation feel. And then the pain. I've done a lot of work with pain. Most recently, the Sundance, there's a pain process of piercing. I didn't pierce this year, but suffering as a service, suffering as a devotion, taking on pain willingly. Cold exposure does this, tattooing does this. There's a way in which we can relate or take action on our higher purpose that disregards, perhaps that's not the best word, but it doesn't put one in the habitual pattern of becoming averse to discomfort. It says, this is right action, and as best as I know it, it feels aligned, so I'm going to do it regardless if there's suffering involved. And even to the degree where the suffering, not to like fetish it or make it the whole thing, but part of the process of the satisfaction and fulfillment is how much suffering can one take on. And this is like a proclamation to the universe. For me, this is a prayer, a willingness to take on suffering, like a sundancer, like a vision quester, like yogic practice on a daily practice. These are offerings to, one day have a child and go without sleep, and to go through certain levels of suffering, which even pale in comparison to my future partner, the mother of my children, who will birth those children and go through a level of pain that I may not ever experience in this life. I don't know all of it, but I have heard that a man's nervous system, most men's nervous system, and we can make a generalization about what most men are. I don't know if this is accurate for all men, but I have heard most men's nervous systems wouldn't be able to take a pregnancy and they would die from the amount of pain, because a woman's nervous system is much stronger, or at least goes through a process to become stronger, strong enough to be able to birth the pain of a child. So take that of that what you will. Those are some of the primary 5 emotions. And when dealing with these emotions, I activate my guidance system. And when connecting with things that have come to me, like the visions I've experienced from the DMT journey, I can begin to see. And I mentioned there had been aspects of me that I had been too scared to admit to myself. And I have a lot of clarity around specific things that I'm here to do. It's not a vague outline of like, I'm here to merge shamanic traditions with internal arts traditions, like I mentioned with Aya Om. I'm here to create a school, very specific, holistic energy medicine. I have it laid out, multi-levels, self-cultivation pathway. There's a harmonization of conscious connected breathwork, qigong, and yogic systems that are offered. I created the holistic energy medicine system, which is a multidisciplinary approach of wisdom traditions of 8 different systems in their own right, which are lifelong subjects of study. There's 8 different systems. One of them is the 8 limbs of yoga. Just that system alone, that's enough to take you to enlightenment. That's enough of a system to study. But I have 5 element theory of traditional Chinese medicine, the 7 chakra theory, the 6 zones of the body, the 3 realms. All of these are built into this. So it's not my system in the sense that I created all this. I don't want to give that information out as if I've masterminded all of this. I've been graced with being a part of many of these systems. So in as best as I can, I hold reverence and respect for them. And spirits offered me a way to teach them to the people at a specific time, because we live in a time where you can be in a small 10-kilometer radius and have a yoga studio and have a qigong practitioner and a breath worker and a temple and a church and all of these things. And we have traditions that are running parallel to one another, which were usually separate. You have shamanic traditions such as the Shipibo ayahuasca tradition and yogic traditions coexisting in the same place. This hasn't been there for most of history. We're in a time of prophecy. Many cultures have spoken to it. The Hopi prophecy, the eagle and the condor prophecy, the rainbow people. We play different roles in this, and part of my role in holistic energy medicine is to harmonize, to weave various different systems for people. Because when I help people to heal, I'm not coming in with, I'm a yogi, I'm going to teach you from the yogic system. I'm going to listen to you, your specific energy design, how your aura operates, what's your unique human design, what's your unique zodiac profile, what's your unique purpose and dharma in this life. And it's not about me having a set thing that I'm going to offer dogmatically to you. It's like, how can I relate to you? Can I offer you a practice from yoga? Or maybe it's more qigong. Maybe I'm going to offer that you freestyle rap because you, like me, have a lot of blockage in your throat. And just like free expression is good for the body to get it out of rigid pathways and patterns of both thinking and being in the world, having a free flow of freestyle rapping can help people to express and get beyond the mind that is constantly controlling the speech, so that free speech can come, perhaps for the first time in an individual's life. Perhaps there's a blockage in your artistic capacity which is blocking your clairvoyance, like early in my childhood when I shut down my clairvoyance because I stopped drawing from my soul and said I was drawing for other people. I don't know where your blockage is, but having a scaffolding of holistic energy medicine systems in the way that I've done it gives me a way of assessing, diagnosing, implementing, and evaluating what we're doing at a multi-dimensional holistic way. And just like I've created a holistic energy medicine system, I've created Wu Ji. Wu Ji is a term from Taoism, and Wu Ji is the term that I use for my system, the internal art that I've created. It primarily harmonizes yoga and qigong, but it's got dance in there, it's got martial arts in there, it's got anything in there that I see fit in the moment. It's hard to define things that are undefinable, so I keep it open. That's why it's called Wu Ji. In Taoist philosophy, there's the Tao, and then there's the infinite, empty field of Wu Ji, which is like the paper that all things are written upon. Without the infinite emptiness of Wu Ji, creation doesn't happen. Wu Ji represents that infinite field of emptiness. So instead of being yoga and people thinking about a number of different static stretches they're going to do, or it being qigong and people thinking about slow moving energy art, it's Wu Ji. It leaves it open for me to integrate the pieces that I know now and the pieces that are coming. For me to teach a session and it start out as yoga but end out as dance, that's all Wu Ji. Because that's how my practice has evolved. And I have to be honest and authentic to the way spirit guides me in my personal practice. It's all Wu Ji. I'm cooking and it's Wu Ji. You know? I mean, sometimes when something is everything, it becomes nothing. So there is some definition I'm giving it to it as I teach it, but ultimately everything is Wu Ji to me. I'm always practicing. I'm always practicing Wu Ji. So a lot of this is really clear for me, and what I had been denying to myself. This is very much the masculine pathway. I talked about Shiva, Shivaya, pathways of self-transcendence through spiritual technologies, where we look within, we use the breath. And I talked about shamanic traditions. Now, indigenous traditions in their ways are very much a middle ground in the sense that they're very shamanic and earth-based, using the elements, but also using internal practices like fasting and not a lot of plant medicines. But if we go on the polarization, I've been associated and connected to many shamanic traditions, such as the peyote that I mentioned. Psilocybin has been a support with me. One of my very first ceremonies when I was 14. I remember getting into psychedelics early in my teen years, and I would tell people, you should try these things. You immediately see God. Spirits and angels come. They teach you all these beautiful things, and people will do them, and they're like, I didn't get what you got. I just got high and watched TV for a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, well, when I do these, I see God. And what was happening to me since I was very young is that I have a connection with various different shamanic lineages, and you could say past lives, but as an alternate perspective, all lives are happening parallel at the same time. So they're just parallel realities that are interacting, just as the past is not happening before, it's happening simultaneously. That's why when I make shifts to the past, my relationships to it, and telling my story, I'm actually shifting the nature of the past, yeah? I had some visions that came through to me when I was very young in my teenage years, and they've been patterned throughout various psychedelic journeys, vision quests, peyote ceremonies. First time I went down to Peru, one of my first ceremonies was so shattering to me. It was like, you're going to do this. I was like, what? What does that even mean? Just like when the spirit, the great spirit said, isn't this everything that you've always wanted? And a part of me has been so curious about shamanism. And that name alone comes with a lot of negativity in the belief systems that I've heard and have at times accepted and taken on. And yet I have an undeniable curiosity with the shamanic arts, and as many of you know, I've done a number of different dietas or plant diets with the ayahuasca and various other master plants, which is part of the traditional training of a Shipibo healer to learn and connect with the spirits of these plants and to develop a relationship with ayahuasca. And in some level, this isn't coming from me at the level of ego, it's the plants calling out. And it's an aspect of my soul that I've been denying, is to walk the shamanic path. It feels very safe and clear with the holistic energy medicine and Wu Ji, the more right-handed masculine path, but I deny my desire to apprentice with ayahuasca. And I got a vision. It's come a number of times that became clear that after my 3 years of sun dancing, I will do a 1-year dieta. Nothing's fully confirmed in the contracts of life, but this is what feels strongly associated with my visions, and I follow my visions insofar as they're clear and they continue to resonate. That apprenticeship would be 1 year of being in a social dieta. Maybe I go to the jungle, but most likely a social diet, in which when you first do ayahuasca, you do your own healing. You do a number of diets, and I'll continue to do those over the next few years for my own healing. And I see images that are related to me when I do that work. But when you apprentice, it shifts over the vision so that the medicine works through you in a different way. So you no longer see your visions, but the visions of the people. This shifting over towards less about my healing, though that's a deep part of it because that's a never-ending thing, and more towards the people is the time in my life that I'm at. I've accumulated enough information and have done enough healing that I have a lot to offer many people. This is part of what it means to be a sun dancer, is to pray more for the community than the self in some sense. And that apprenticing is that same way, is to live more for service of others than service of self, knowing that the highest service to self is service to other. The orientation is different. It has to be the deconditioning of that basic egoic impulse towards pleasure as an orientation, particularly 5 cents, particularly for the money, for the sex, and for the power as a guidance system, and a surrendering towards the higher will and love for God. This is an extinguishing of the ordinary repulsion and orientation away from discomfort and pain, with a willingness to take on whatever level of suffering comes with the path. And I'm still coming into recognition at my level of commitment towards this. And because if I take on this apprenticeship, this puts me on a very difficult path that on some level I don't want to do at the level of my ego because I'm scared. Because a life of a shaman is not easy. Doing diets, being in celibacy, being in isolation, taking on the pain of other people, because when I help people in these ways, I take on their energy and transmute it through me. It's not easy. There's a lot of spiritual paths, and a lot of them have a lot of light. And there's a lot of spiritual paths that go into the darkness to invite in the light. The shamanic path with ayahuasca, as I know it, particularly in the Shipibo traditions, which I'm associated with, has a lot of that, going into the darkness to find the light. And I'm scared. I'm scared for myself, and I'm scared for my family. I'm scared for what this means for my children. But that's at the level of my ego. I can also see the incredible amount of love and alignment. For God's sake, my name is Aya. And I can see how Spirit has shown me this many times, and I've pushed it away. And because I've pushed it away, I've denied an aspect of my soul. And there are many imbalances in my bodies and things that I'm suppressing and not fully allowing myself to experience and know about myself because I've been pushing this away. And it's sensitive to admit because I haven't made these confirmations, but I have made that first commitment to myself to go to Peru for 3 months. Haven't fully booked that one yet, so that's where I'm at in my process. Often I share things when I'm like, I'm doing this, I've booked it, because I'm at that level of confidence. Now you see where I'm at. This is often how I go through a process. I'll receive a download in a moment where my fears and doubts aren't so powerful, when I'm so connected to my source and the infinite power of possibility, the creative essence of the universe. And I'm like, yes, this is what I want. This is an aligned desire. But it takes my orientation, my stability on that prayer to move beyond the doubts and the fears as they come up. So I'm at a point with the 1-year dieta, let alone the 3-month dieta, of honoring my doubts and my fears. And I appreciate sharing these things because I'm not making any commitments at this point. I'm just walking every breath, every step, and as best as I can. Just like as a sun dancer, staring up at that tree, dancing for 4 days without food or water, just focusing on Creator and the prayer, trusting the guidance with faith. Where there's any anger, let there be kindness. And where there's anxiety, let there be love. When there's worries, let me have faith. When there's sadness and loneliness on the path, let me have courage. And when there's fear, give me wisdom. In these last few years, particularly the last year, I've come to my edge so many times where I'm out-resourced, where I don't have it. I don't know what to do. And these are the moments where I actually surrender to God and I allow myself to be guided by something bigger than what my mind has known. These are the times, just like the process that I went on to know that I'm going to be a father in this life, same thing. A part of me just wants to push it away because it feels like it's easier just to be alone and single, and I can build up in my mind how much more I could do if I'm alone and just following the path. And yet I can't deny what my soul keeps giving me, and maybe that'll shift. Maybe it's just a timeline. Maybe there's a parallel reality that I'll shift to. But I can't deny what's so strong in my field. So just like the surrendering to the understanding that I'm meant to be a father in this life, and I'm meant to have a soulmate which I do this good work with, and I'm meant to follow this path with ayahuasca insofar. And then to realize, isn't this everything you've ever wanted? I've all seen this in the vision already. I've met my wife. I've seen my child. I know my little daughter already. I know I'm going to die. I know that's not the end. So in as best as I can, I'm saying yes in this moment and doing my best to be that 10 out of 10 yes. Because I know when I'm in a 5 out of 10 yes, and I'm just saying yes to life. And I've done that for long enough. Working a career in dental hygiene or saying yes to relationships that have been 5 out of 10. And that's when I get to the low points, when the negative thought form entities can get in my mind. That's when I get to the weak mind that wants to run out of things. But when I'm 10 out of 10 yes, I'm willing to take on the pain and the discomfort of the securities that I have and the path that I have and trust and alignment. I'm sick of living with the cord around my neck. I'm sick of not sharing my voice. I know what comes, at least in a little bit, from being a trailblazer, being a contrarian, shifting and orienting towards the shamanic worlds, bringing forth systems that challenge the current medical models of energy and medicine, harmonizing and blending lineages with the people with their dogmatic views on how they see God and spirit and spiritual progression, challenging people by making bold claims about knowing when I will die and other people will die, being a channel and a medium and having these kinds of trainings, speaking towards the dead. There's so much controversy, and it's going to be met with a lot of resistance from a lot of people. But there's also so much love. And ultimately, the love that I have of Source moving through me, this is the most powerful source. It's the ultimate resource. And I'm not perfect, and I have an addict in my form. Jealousy, manipulation, played victim for a lot of time. Still will from time to time. Sabotaging, like a saboteur, prostituting myself, but just like negative emotions, just like anger, anxiety, worry, sadness, and fear, they're here in my wholeness to complete the circle. You know, that's the path of the dark and the light. In many ways, I see the Om pathway, the Shivaya pathway, as orientation towards the light. Whereas the ayahuasca path is like the orientation of the roots going down into the earth, the darkness, the shadow. I want to know myself from the depths of that tree down deep into the soil to the highest heights. Because it's not just about me. It's about what's best for me and my family, because I've seen the healing work, the shrinking of tumors that I've been taught, and the tumors that my dad got, which are actively doing quite well. I've seen the healing of my own anger and the healing of my father's anger. I see my grandfather's face, my bups who've done so much to suffer as a child, to learn his lessons, to pave the way, to build a life for his grandchildren. So his prayers coming into this moment, and my prayers for my children to do the same, to live on that lineage of offering a beautiful home and environment, not just externally, but internally, to help myself to heal so that my children don't have to live with that multi-generational anger, the anxieties, the worries, the sadness, the loneliness on their path. So that I can be a good father and a man among men, as an expansive man member, a men's work leader, a guide for internal arts practices. So I pray and I say Tankashila. I say Ahoma Takuwasan, and this way of praying I'm saying, Great Spirit, this is who I'm talking to first and foremost. I have a beautiful friend, Vern Petty, who's the Expansive Man leader, the one who called forth that organization. He's an incredible teacher, and he talked about his journey in speaking. He's an amazing speaker. And he talked about when you talk, know who you're talking to. And sometimes talk as if you're talking to 100 people. I'm learning to express myself more and more in an articulate way that comes with emotional expression rather than just like humdrum, just basic monotonous. And he talks about, visualizing, in some way connecting with speaking to big groups of people so you can make that connection. And I offered that I love when I start off my conversations or my prayers with Ahom Takuwasin or Tankashila, saying the name of God, because that's who I'm speaking to. Or all my relations. I'm speaking to all my relations, not just the people who are going to hear this, but I'm speaking to my future children, my grandchildren. My speech is a little different when I know I'm speaking to my grandma, I'll tell you that. I'll still say inappropriate things, but I'll say them with a love in my heart. So when I say that, and I pray in this way, you know what I ask for in this moment? I ask for forgiveness and I ask for guidance in the things that I've said and the things that I have not said. Perhaps I've said too much about my life. Perhaps I've rambled on, and perhaps I've said too little. I don't know. I don't know so much. This is part of the great mystery, and I ask for guidance, like, help me to pray. And I'm not saying this from a disempowered place. I'm not saying this because I don't know at some level. I'm talking about from the level of my ego, the limitations of my material mind as to what I have known so far. I don't know all the things, and I don't know what's next. I don't know how the abundance is going to come in. But an aspect of me, that's the aspect I'm speaking to in this way. There's a knowing there. So help me to pray. Help me to pray in the way that I know how, and help me to have humility on the path. I thought I learned a bit about humility being a dental hygienist, but I got a lot to learn still. About being honest and humble with my ego and the ways in which I still want power, and I still don't use sex in a good way. Still have a level of unconsciousness around the way in which I give and receive energy and money in the universe. So show me, like Kali, show me swiftly, fiercely, so that I may align my life. And let me be a light in this world, a bridge, a raft, food for the hungry, water for the thirsty. Let me help others. Help me to purify my body in the light. From all levels of my being, purge and release anything that no longer serves my highest path. Fill me with love, with light, courage, and wisdom, and bring me into full alignment with my divine purpose. Wani wachielo, wani wachielo, wani wachielo. I want to live. I want to live, and I choose life. I choose to voluntarily take on the suffering of this path with love in my heart, in as best as I can. I say these words in a kind and gentle way. All my relations.